I always start off these sorts of videos with something like, this is the best monitor ever. And this is one of those, but for totally different reasons and for a particular use case. And I've seen a few reviews of this pop up on YouTube already. So we did reach out to LG and ask if they would send us one of these for review. And not only did they do that, they also agreed to sponsor this video. So this video is sponsored by LG, but we are literally going to put this monitor through its paces for you today, since we're going to check out what sort of FPS it can hit in both modes in various games and how that compares to other monitors, as well as talk about PlayStation and Xbox performance, but also, and of course, productivity and testing out what the screen is like for content consumption, pixel density, color accuracy, and just all of the good stuff. So onto the unboxing experience. It seems that LG has changed their packaging from the earlier unboxings I've seen on this monitor. Gone is the plain old cardboard box, and instead we have a really slim box with all of its key features given a mention. Now in terms of the accessories, we get an HDMI and DisplayPort cable, USB Type A to B cable, the power brick, and the power lead, in addition to, all of the usual paperwork. There's also this plastic cover, which is used to hide the ports and some of the cabling on the back, and of course, the stand itself, which comes in 2 parts. All of it is super easy to unbox and assemble. The stand just clicks into the back of the monitor, and then the bottom of the stand just slots in and does up with these 2 thumb screws. Otherwise, it's just a case of picking it up and placing it on your desk, which as a 32-inch monitor shouldn't be challenging for most people. Now onto the specs, since this is what drives most people to buy a particular monitor or not buy a particular monitor. So this is a 31.5-inch 4K OLED at 240 Hz monitor, whose unique feature is that at a touch of the button, you can change this to a 480 Hz Full HD monitor. All of this with a 0.03 millisecond response time for when you need those super fast gaming speeds. There's support for NVIDIA G-Sync, AMD FreeSync, including support for VRR, as well as being Display HDR 400 certified, and another first for me, something they call Immersive Pixel Sound, where the speakers play through the OLED screen to provide a more immersive experience. But don't worry, we're going to be testing that just to see if it's actually any good. So far, so good. There's certainly nothing I can really grumble about here yet. Now, personally, I'm a fan of curved monitors, but given that this one is only 31.5 inches, it is not something that you need to be concerned about. Although I would say it's like right on the edge of where maybe a shallow curve might be needed at around, say like 38 inches or higher. But again, this is personal preference and doesn't cause any issues of a screen of this size. Now, what might split opinion though is with the matte coating, which does a really good job at reducing reflections. I know, just let me explain here. Now, I love these new screens that are coming out with this much improved anti-glare coating. It's actually really difficult to explain because I know some people don't like a matte display. They say gaming monitors should be glossy, but the coatings on these displays are getting so good now that they really do, in some situations, look like a glossy display when you catch it in certain lights, just without the issue of harsh reflections that those glossy finish coatings do suffer from. So we are literally sat in front of a huge light right now, and you can see there are barely any reflections. Even that window, you can see there's a window right there. You do see it, but it's not like a mirror like you do get in most of the glossy displays. So this monitor also uses the same MLA technology that LG uses in their flagship TVs, which brings their OLED peak brightness on this screen to around about 260 nits. And there are a couple of different gaming modes here, as HDR gaming modes to be aware of, in either low or high peak brightness settings, which can impact the color accuracy, which I'll get to in just a moment. But generally speaking, overall, this monitor is quite the package. The design is super clean. It's a simple design with a touch of gaming without going over the top. Its construction, absolutely solid. The ports are all easy accessible, and just ergonomically speaking, it is a solid display. You've got the quick release on the stand, the simple but effective cable management, easy access screen controls, which is the same, great LG system that LG uses across its UltraGear range. There's also the button down here that switches between 240 Hz and 480 Hz modes. And just when looking at this screen head on, it just looks stunning. Now, of course, if you do want to jazz up the looks of your, gaming room with a bunch of LEDs, there is a ton of space to attach those on the back as well, because, as the usual, the built-in LEDs on the back, same as we see on every gaming monitor, to be fair, are really only there for decoration, not to really, really brightly glare against your wall and turn it into like, you know, gaming heaven, that kind of stuff. There is no included remote control, but the on-screen controls just, you know, they work really, really well. There's quick access to everything you need, and you can set custom shortcuts, either the left or right-hand side here, to your, you know, most often used features. It's basically the same great OSD experience that we get, again, like I've said before, on LG's range of UltraGear monitors. The stand itself, also really, really solid, like I said, with built-in cable management and with a footprint that is not huge and causes, you know, like issues with intruding on the rest of your desk. You can change the height, tilt, swivel, and it pivots, but only to one side. So if for any reason, you know, you want to use this screen in portrait mode, you can do that if you want to. But to be fair, I usually just throw my monitors onto my favorite monitor arm just to, you know, save all the space I can underneath the screen. Now, right now, that's the Secret Labs heavy duty monitor arm due to the fact it's just a like super solid arm, super adjustable, doesn't droop like, you know, some other cheaper arms that I've used. Definitely not cheap, I'll give you that, but it does fit to any desk. You don't need a Secret Labs desk, but enough about that anyway. Okay, so ignore everything I just said about using the Secret Labs monitor arm. So we've just tried putting the LG monitor on the arm that's no longer there, and the problem is the base plate you get on the Secret Labs, which is just like a standard Visa base plate, has this kind of couple of lips on the bottom of it where it hooks in to the other part of the monitor arm, but because this is recessed into the actual back of the monitor, you can't get the hooks in, which then means you can't then screw the kind of screws in and basically mount on the monitor arm. So yeah, however much I love the Secret Labs monitor arm, currently does not work with this monitor, although you could get some standoff screws. I know some places you can get some little standoff mounts that pushes the monitor, the Visa mount out. That's basically what you would have to do to get this monitor arm working, but it doesn't come with any standoff screws. It just comes basically, you know, like that. That's it. So yeah, don't not buy the monitor arm, but get some standoff screws would be my suggestion, because it's a great monitor arm. It's just, yeah, it sucks. It doesn't work out of the box. Anyway, back to me. I'll leave a link down below if you want to check that one out, because let's talk about the connectivity. And this is really one of the only areas I can really criticize here. So you've got two HDMI 2.1 ports, one DisplayPort 1.4 ports, two USB Type A ports, and a USB Type B ports that you can hook up to your computer as an upstream. Now the problem here is that there is only one USB upstream port, so you can't hook those USB devices up to more than one device. You know, so there's no KVM feature in here. There is also no USB-C ports here either. So those of you wanting, you know, a simple way to hook up a laptop will have to use either a dock or connect, you know, display, power, and also the USB cable if you want to use those USB built-in ports as well. Now, I kind of feel like where we are today with technology, USB-C support should be standard on everything, since it just provides a, you know, super easy, convenient way to like connect, charge, and display all in a single cable. But that's really the only issue to someone like me. You know, for others who are just wanting to hook this up to a gaming PC that has like HDMI and DisplayPort, total non-issue. Also, speaking of me for just a moment, if you are enjoying this video or if you're finding it useful, do consider subscribing to the channel for more down below. I plan on keeping this monitor for the foreseeable future, so if you have like any questions, then I'll be responding to each and every question in the comments down below, which as the channel grows is getting quite challenging, but I will try my best. Now, resolution-wise, this screen runs at 3840 by 2160 and at 140 pixels per inch, which is the same pixels per inch PPI as the 57-inch G9, same as the 40-inch Dell, and actually the same vertical resolution from those screens. You just get, you know, either more or less width between those monitors. Now, the PPI is a huge improvement over the LG 45-inch UltraGears. It was like 83 pixels per inch, which really did impact using that monitor for productivity. And I want to start doing this for all the monitors we test now, but I'm going to try and replicate what it's like for me when sats were actually a lot closer than I normally would, just to show you that, you know, if you lean in and try and pixel peep and really try and see those pixels, at least here on the LG in its 4K mode, you really can't. It's like super nice to work with for productivity. So I'm glad to say with this screen, there are no issues whatsoever with resolution, PPI and scaling and, you know, all that good stuff for this screen. But the magic trick of this monitor is the technology that LG calls Dual Mode, which is essentially this button down here underneath, which when you push, changes your monitor from a 4K 240 Hz display to a full HD 480 Hz display, which is just nuts, let's just say that. And I really like this. It's like a button to switch between 4K productivity, worky stuff during the daytime to like hardcore gamer at night with ultra fast refresh rates, along with that 0.03 millisecond response time. Now, what that means from game to game, we are going to show you all of the most popular games and show you what FPS I was able to hit in both 4K and full HD modes with our gaming rig, just so you know what this screen is actually capable of. But what I will say is that this dual mode switch works flawlessly inside of both Mac and Windows. But if you try and switch like mid-game, some of the games behave differently and not all of them will then automatically adjust the game settings. Even if you go into the game settings of that game, I found myself having to like completely quit and relaunch the game to like actually see that sometimes dramatic increase in FPS when going from say 4K to 1080p. But again, more on those FPS tests later in this video. But why, when you've got a beautiful 4K display, would you want to drop down to 1080p full HD? Well, there are a few reasons. Now, firstly, not everyone's computers are powerful enough to push the 4K resolution and might suffer from, in gaming, really low FPS with like stuttering frames. So lowering the resolution means that even a low power PC can still perform quite well in games. And then also, this isn't me, but I hear that when you get up to like the pro level of gaming, it is quite common to have a smaller monitor with much lower resolution to achieve those like insanely high refresh rates and 480 hertz refresh rates here, because the performance will just be so much better. Now, one thing I do see crop up a lot in all the comment section whenever I review any OLED monitor is those asking about burn-in protection and that they would never buy an OLED because of their worry about burn-in. But my perspective on this, as someone who has 2 OLED TVs at home, who has long-term use of OLED monitors in general, like both day-to-day productivity use with, the Mac menu bar always at the top or the Windows bar at the bottom, long Fortnite sessions with the heads-up display in the same place for hours at a time, every evening. Even more so now, my kid plays, quite embarrassingly, some days like 8 hours of Fortnite, now it's summer holidays, and that's before I get to play in the evenings. And I haven't seen a single issue with burn-in on any OLED monitor or panel that I've ever used. Now, that doesn't mean to say that it doesn't exist, it doesn't happen, that my experience across a wide range of OLED monitors from various different brands across 3 years of consistent use, for me, it's not been a problem. Now, most brands, LG included here, also include anti-burn-in protection features that shift like pixels around to minimize any burn-in issues. And I've had those enabled, it's enabled right now on this monitor. But even though it technically like shifts the pixels around, I've genuinely not noticed anything. You kind of expect it to like move the image around, but whatever it is, super clever, seems to work. But of course, that is quite difficult for any reviewer to talk about this monitor specifically, unless they've literally owned this for multiple years. So only time will tell, of course, but they've got all of the good stuff in here. But again, like I said, you might be sat there disagreeing with this because you've suffered burn-in. So I'm not gonna just dismiss that it's not a thing, only that I've not experienced it yet on an OLED panel. Now, I think the last time I saw burn-in was on a plasma TV. Does anyone remember the plasma TVs? But with that said, because this is like brand new information that I only received like yesterday on this monitor, LG will cover burn-in issues under their standard warranty. They didn't used to, but I think the community probably made their opinions very clear on this. And it's good to see that LG will now cover any burn-in issues within the warranty period. But the good news, as with all OLED monitors, is that the colors on this thing are so nice, vibrant, punchy, all sorts of other words that aren't anything to do with like mathematical benchmarks or anything like that. But we've got 98.5% DCI P3 and 1.5 million to 1 contrast ratio. So it has got super good color accuracy, great contrast, great for watching content, general productivity work, even professional work like graphics, video work, gaming. And there is, obviously with an OLED panel, no blooming like I do see on like my other non-OLED panels, which gets really frustrating after a while. Now, in terms of that color accuracy, I mentioned there are 2 different HDR modes. You've got low HDR and high HDR modes. And what that means is it gives you a brighter peak brightness on that higher mode. But what others have found is that color accuracy does take a hit when using that high setting. Now, I did check the website for this monitor, and someone's actually asked a question about when a firmware update will come out to fix this. And the official response underneath that is basically there is no information on a fix. But again, this will come down to personal preference on whether you care about this or not. Some people do, some people don't. But again, just something you should be aware of here. And now I actually find myself using this monitor in low mode for like general productivity stuff, and then high mode for some of the games. And actually, there are a ton of Reddit posts about how people have calibrated this monitor with various HDR settings and HDR calibration modes and all sorts. So if you do buy the screen and you're interested in that, go check those posts out. They're on Reddit. But outside of those potential issues, it's an OLED, like super insane contrast ratio. HDR looks good. If only it did go a little bit brighter, I would say. But we are kind of getting to the stage now where, the glare from the sun in a game kind of makes you squint, which is actually really super cool if you think about it, that like technology can do that. And again, people can be quite picky, but as someone who has used this for day-to-day work as well as gaming, it has been a wonderful experience. And not once have I thought to myself that it wasn't bright enough or the colors weren't like good enough. Really, really fantastic monitor. Now, before we get onto the gaming kind of benchmark results, quickly touching on productivity, since this is kind of this, monitor's party trick. Daytime productivity machine, nighttime gaming monster.
Nighttime. Daytime!
And so I have this hooked up to both Mac and PC. And as far as the Mac goes, aside from the fact there is no USB-C and charging, like I said before, honestly, it's flawless. Like full resolution, I'm using an M3 Max MacBook Pro and it can get 4K 240 Hertz. It also supports VRR from 48 to 144 Hertz and with HDR support as well, which really surprisingly doesn't fudge up all of the colors you get when enable HDR on a Mac. I find on some monitors, you enable HDR and the colors just go all like really screwy, but you can comfortably leave this with HDR enabled with no issues at all. Again, there's no USB KVM or anything, so you probably want to pick up maybe a docking station so you can actually just use one single cable. Again, I'll link to one down below for my favorites that do work. But the most surprising thing about this monitor on a Mac is that when you tap the dual mode button, I actually get 480 Hertz at 1080p, which to me is just like mind blowing, like genuinely, because it's a Mac. And I usually find Macs just always struggle, especially when it comes to gaming, of course. But this seems to work absolutely fine. Now, the question being, what games actually work on Mac that will run up to that? That's another question. Although I did find myself having to like reconnect the HDMI cable a few times when just pressing the button because it kind of glitched out a little bit. But other than that, absolutely flawless. Now, over in Windows, it's a very, very similar story. Like no issues whatsoever with Windows, full resolution, full refresh rate. But of course, you just need to be sure that your graphics card and your PC will actually support them and be able to get, anywhere near the refresh rates you're hoping for and FPS you're hoping for. And again, tapping the dual mode switch to 480 Hertz at full HD, literally no issues at all. It just works as you'd expect. Now, there is no picture in picture or picture by picture. Again, just something they've not included on this model. But let's get to the good bit here. Gaming performance. Now, I did the grueling task of playing all of the top games in both 4K 240 Hertz and Full HD 480 Hertz. So for reference, PC I'm running here is running a 4090 card along with an Intel 149-900K. And I'm going to show you what sort of FPS I was able to hit in each game mode set to native resolution at both, again, 240, 480 Hertz, and with all of the quality settings like maxed out on each game. So Epic, Ultra, whatever each game supports at their highest settings. And I've got results from other monitors, which I'm going to show you and just compare to as well. And these aren't like super accurate benchmark results. I basically look at the rough FPS that I was able to hit and kind of gone somewhere in the middle of those. So this isn't, again, like mathematically like benchmarky, just to give you a general idea of what you'd expect with a similar spec PC and this monitor. So first up, Helldivers 2 hit 102 FPS in 4K and then 130 FPS in 1080p. Cyberpunk's benchmark mode was 101 FPS in 4K and double that at 211 FPS in 1080p, huge difference there. Fortnite was hitting around 130 to 140 FPS on average in 4K mode, and then 160 FPS in 1080p mode. Warzone reached around 150 FPS in 4K, 190 FPS in Full HD. Forza Horizon 5 was 170 FPS average in 4K mode, and then 240 FPS in 1080p mode. And then the king of all FPS, no matter what screen you're using, Overwatch 2 at 200 FPS in 4K mode, and wait for it, 530 FPS in dual mode, which is just absolutely insane numbers. And those numbers with Overwatch can vastly change depending on what's going on at the time. It can fluctuate like 100 FPS higher and lower, but yeah, just crazy numbers. So it is pretty obvious, lower resolution equals more FPS, and that's anywhere from 25% better to sometimes even double or more that. But this is actually a really nice balance here, because depending on the spec of your PC, you can decide to go for the 4K gaming 240 Hertz if your PC can handle it, or if you choose at the push of a button to switch to 1080p for that ultra smooth 480 Hertz refresh rate and like ultra fast FPS, if that's something you prefer. And so personally speaking here, if you have a capable gaming PC, I found it more enjoyable to play on 4K mode and keeping that for 240 Hertz, since dropping down to that 1080p, even at 480 Hertz, just loses a lot of the detail and the quality. But again, with a combination of the OLED panel, 0.03 millisecond response time, I didn't see any like ghosting or any issues like that. This really is an absolute beast when it comes to gaming, but then also productivity, because again, you just literally push the button and get that 4K resolution for, you know, browsing the web, doing emails and consuming content, and that kind of stuff. Now, very quickly, touching on both Xbox and PS5 performance, the good news here is that due to the aspect ratio, there's no like odd black bars down the side when you hook a console up that you get with, you know, the more ultra wide monitors. And it supports everything for the PS5, like 120 Hz, HDR, VRR, like all of the good stuff. And same on the Xbox side of things, supports everything except Dolby Vision, which, you know, isn't really an issue for most people. So if you do happen to buy one of these with the intention of using it for console gaming, it's just going to be an awesome monitor for that. But again, just remember that the consoles will cap out at 120 Hz. You won't be able to get like 240 or 480 Hz from anything but a computer. But again, if that's maybe sat next to your desktop PC and you're using a console, I can see that being a really, really nice way to play your console games too. And during regular use, it doesn't get too warm. It generally sits around like 31, 32 degrees and gets up to around about 37 degrees when I was gaming. And it does get a little bit warmer on the back of the monitor. But again, like nothing to write home about. It's nowhere near being like too warm to touch or anything like that. So yeah, no issues. But what about this immersive pixel sound? Actually, again, really, really good, like really, really impressed. Now, yes, of course, it's still not gonna be as good as a proper set of like dedicated speakers, but I am really impressed with the like fullness of audio that comes through this monitor. Like, and it comes like through the screen, like literally through the OLED panel. Now it's nearly impossible to show you this, of course, but using a sound level meter, it's actually, you know, quieter around the edges of the monitor than it is in the center of the panel. And it sounds much, much better than like other, you know, regular downward firing speakers that most monitors with, you know, like built-in speakers kind of produce. Now, as far as energy consumption goes, 43, 44 watts in both full HD and 4K modes. There wasn't really much of a difference I saw. Although if you do show a full page of, you know, bright white on high HDR mode, I saw it go up to as high as 56 or so watts. So yeah, if you are power conscious, then it's worth just going dark mode all the way within Windows and Mac side of things. There is also a built-in fan inside the screen that's meant to help with cooling, but honestly, for the life of me, I cannot hear it. Like, even when putting your ear right up against the vent along the top, still can't hear it. Even when running the pixel cleaning process there, I just find like the overall room noise is far louder than, you know, the basically silent fan that's inside of here. And of course, if all else fails, LG provides you with a 2-year warranty on this screen. That includes burn-in protection, like I said before. That's just been told to me, so they may well have not updated their website or their marketing material, but this is what I've been told for this monitor. And again, with the caveats that I've mentioned earlier, that my experience of burn-in thus far have been, you know, completely non-existent, and especially with all of the new pixel shifting technology being added to these monitors. So there are only really a few things I can really pick at here. Like some odd issues with the color accuracy with HDR brightness when set to high, the fact there's no USB-C or USB KVM support. Otherwise, this is a really, surprisingly, really solid monitor. I was not expecting this when I reviewed this monitor. It is like great for productivity. That dual mode feature means you can have the choice to either aim for the quality or the higher frames per second when you're gaming. And honestly, the anti-glare coating is really, really nice. I know it's not glossy, but it's a really, really good coating on there. So as to the alternatives, I don't really know what else to recommend here. Like, this one sits in a really unique position with that dual mode. Now, usually you'd have to go for a more gaming monitor, which is like maybe the 45-inch LG UltraGear, which is then like really poor for productivity. Or something that's great for productivity, like the even bigger ultra wides, but then you lose out on performance due to the overall bigger monitor and wider resolution they have to drive. Now, I was actually speaking to someone whilst reviewing this monitor who was considering either the 45-inch UltraGear or the 40-inch Dell that we reviewed previously, and I mentioned this monitor to them, and they said it was a really, really strong contender as well because the ability to switch modes. But what do you think? Let me know in the comments down below. Would you get this, or would you consider something else instead? Now, if you are someone who works by day and games by night, this might actually be a great monitor for you to try out. And again, I'll leave the links down below for you to go and check one of those out for yourself. Huge thank you for you to watching, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye-bye.